This afternoon, I am in Dallas at the University of North Texas, speaking with the founding director of its library, Edward T. Hart, whose official titles are Assistant Professor of Law and Assistant Dean for Law Library. Ed, you came to the university in August of 2013.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. Well, before we begin talking about that and your career, I'd like to sort of ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself as a regular person, a human being, I like to phrase it. Could you tell us a little bit about your life, including not just maybe recently or now, but also when you were younger?
Well, I am a native, born and raised in Valdosta, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
The youngest of 5 boys. My parents, George Hart and Lily Kate Hart. That was my mom's hometown, so there was loads of cousins, the grandparents, and all that. So it was a fun growing up there for me. Very different from what my son's experiencing now.
I imagine you live somewhere here in the city or nearby.
Yeah, it's very different nowadays.
Uh-huh.
Went to public schools. Quite often, as being the 5th and the last of the Hart boys, kept me and said, "Oh no, another Hart boy."
You mean your brothers had their own reputations, and you got all the vicarious credit for whatever naughty things they've done?
And some good things. So,
well, that's good.
One particular biology teacher in high school kept calling me Redden, which is the second number 2 son.
Uh-huh.
My entire year at her class.
I'm glad to, hopefully you figured out that you should respond when you heard that name.
I did when I heard the name.
Got to be flexible.
For the most part, we all ended up going to the local state college, which is now State University of Valdosta State.
Mm-hmm.
My parents, which is probably actually doomed me, I shouldn't say doomed me, I should say blessed me for my potential future career.
Mm-hmm.
My dad, although not a lawyer, was first a justice of the peace,
mm-hmm.
and then became chief magistrate when the Georgia changed their system. Mm-hmm. So he was a judge. My mother, when she started off as a school teacher, and became a school librarian, but then became a librarian at the local public library. So I had fun growing up through my late middle school years, early high school years of hanging out at the public library and at the courthouse.
Mm-hmm. So you had a judge in the family and a librarian.
Mm-hmm. Did have some fun along the way. Doing a junior year abroad and then in some graduate studies overseas.
Uh-huh.
Never got that first degree overseas, but I ended up meeting my future wife, Karen.
Mm-hmm.
And when it came time to pick law schools and where we're going, she had a big influence because she was coming from England.
Oh.
So
you met her over on that side of the pond?
Yeah.
Oh,
and a pub.
Great.
So I got down to the pretty much a choice was between Mercer and Macon, Georgia,
mm-hmm.
and the Newman School of Law in Boston. And I just couldn't see my wife coming from England and settling in Macon, Georgia. So we went to Boston.
Yeah.
Got married in my first year of law school. Some people asked me, did she marry me for a green card? I said, no, I married her so she'll pay the rent while I was in law school.
So the motivation was reversed from what one might think. Yeah.
But it was a fun time. We had a good time there.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, went to Newman School of Law. With all intents of coming back home to Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
There was one local lawyer.
Presumably practicing law, maybe?
Practice law. There was one attorney in my hometown. There was one attorney in my hometown, had been a graduate of New England. And he showed me that even, going to a Yankee school,
mm-hmm.
as they still would say.
You don't get much more Yankee than
you can,
being in Boston.
That you can, well, actually another reason I chose Boston to begin with is my dad's from Brookline.
Okay.
So I actually did have some aunts and cousins up in that area. So it was good to have a few years to get better connected with them, having spent all my life up to that point in Valdosta with all my mother's family. But like I said, went to the School of Law, did get the job in the library for 2 years as a student worker. Became the student worker in the circulation office, learning more than I ever really want to know about interlibrary loan for 6 months.
In those days,
when they were filling in.
Perhaps wasn't all computerized.
Yes. But it was also nice at that time because it was you got to learn about the other libraries, and you know, is even though yes, there's this formal interlibrary loan system, which I can't even remember the names of nowadays. There was a lot of connections between the people.
Yeah.
And I can remember one time Harvard charged to borrow anything from them.
Okay.
We didn't charge anything. The Harvard Business School had a professor once who ended up making 5 requests from us in like a little less than 2 weeks. And during one of those exchanges about the requests, you know, the business librarian said, you know, when y'all need something, call me directly. You know, y'all done nice to us. We'll make sure that the fee gets waived for you next time. So that was really, you know, touch that there is this network of comrades and colleagues.
Yeah.
And it spans the specialities between law and business and other areas. So that was you know, one of the good feelings about starting off and thinking about it.
Now, this professor came to you perhaps because maybe he wasn't as welcome over in Langdale Hall or where the library, the law library was?
No, actually, thanks to, we had the social law library. We're the only two who collected everything possible from the Massachusetts Continuing Legal Education.
Oh.
And, you know, every now and then, CLE material, or we're like Enron debacles come. That's why the first time they come up, because the lawyers are trying to figure out how to handle this mess.
Yeah.
And MCLE was very prolific in what they produce. And like I said, we and social were the only ones that had everything. I mean, that's another issue, an example of times. It was funny, our cataloger at New England was quite often the original cataloger for that MCLE materials. The other catalogers in Boston would every now and then call her and say, you going to get around to this anytime soon? Because we're kind of waiting on
They were waiting on her, huh?
to do the copy cataloging. So it was good.
Well, of course, when we all got involved in the utilities, like OCLC, and before that, some of them Harlan, again, you'd wait around to have, sometimes the Library of Congress put their official one in there.
Yeah, but it was, but she was the original guy with that. But no, it was fun. I got to work in the library as a student, and so the librarians knew me, doing the circulation desk, doing this access services in the backside, and also doing some of the periodical management, because we still had a lot of periodicals back then. But I had every intent to go back home to Georgia. I did go back to Georgia. I ended up to the Georgia bar. I did something that one of my favorite professors told me not to do, which is I took 2 bars at once. I took the Georgia bar and the Massachusetts bar. Spent 2 days, Tuesday, Wednesday in Atlanta, and then flew back up to the Massachusetts bar on Thursday. Somehow I passed. Don't know how.
Passed both of them. Huh?
Passed both of them.
Good.
But my hometown, Valdosta, is on the border with Florida.
All right.
And we're the biggest town for about the first 50, 60 miles into Florida. So it was recommended to me, go ahead and get the Florida bar out of the way as well, because we have a lot of people coming up. They want to help. So I had signed up to do the Florida bar the next February. I also had another graduate degree I needed to finish up that I had interrupted for my law studies. And then I was also job hunting, because unfortunately coming from Boston, their career services networking did not quite reach all the way down there. And while that New England grad who was in my hometown was happy to probably lend me a room for short term, I wasn't quite prepared to go out and hang up on shingle, so I was looking around. So in 2000, having now taken the Florida bar and passed it, that spring I was about to accept a job to write opinion letters for the Florida Department of Revenue and live in Tallahassee. I got a call from the New England School of Law. Barry Stearns, one of the reference librarians there. And he said, Ed, you still looking for a job? I said, yeah. He said, would you like to come be our acquisitions librarian? And I said, yeah. because Bon Flaherty, who had the job, was going to move over to Suffolk Law School. And says, well, Frank Bay, the director, he'll call you shortly. They have an interview with you. 10 minutes later, Frank Bay called me and had my phone interview for about 10 minutes and had a job offer. Well, my wife, who had just spent 6 months living in Tallahassee, says, we're going back to Boston.
She was a Southern belle.
So we went back to Boston and ended up working at the New England School of Law for 5 years. Ann Acton, who was the associate director at that time, who's now the director of New England, said if I was going to make a career of this, I need to go to library school.
Okay.
My mother also said the same thing, and you listen to your mother, because that was, she was a school librarian, so she had the master's in education, but never had a library degree. And when she made that switch to the public library, it handicapped her career there.
Yeah, you need the
she said
credential.
You had to have the MLS.
Yeah.
So I started in May at New England School of Law of 2000. That August, I was at the Simmons College to get my library degree there.
Well, it's a good school.
And
happens to be local too.
It was local there. It was a fun school going down there, and of course, when you get around to the legal bibliography class, at that time Virginia Wise was teaching it, and she was doing it over at Harvard. So, for a semester, I got the free run of Langdale.
Didn't have to pay that fee if you can do the book.
Didn't have to pay fees or anything. Of course, I did find out my wife ended up getting a job at Harvard, and I found out I could get a spouse's card for $1. And that gave me a free run of both the Widener Library and Langdale. So that was, for a new library science student, it was like hog heaven.
Yeah, you were in the inner circle.
For me, it was actually, one of the things I actually go there is to go over and see, I've forgotten the exact title, was to go look at the British and Irish Association of Law Libraries, their quarterly journal. Because you didn't have it online back then, and Harvard's the only one who had it at Langdale. So it was always fun to go there and read that in the print and see that. So I ended up staying at New England for 5 years as Acquisitions and Government Documents Librarian.
And you got the library degree.
Got the library degree, finished that in December 2001? No, 2002. Because going through part-time. It was kind of funny because, of course, after you've gone to law school, library school is kind of anticlimactic, but it was very good to finally learn some of the foundations of the service mentality that we have in our profession. Barry Stearns, the one who made the connection for me and got me the job at New England, only had his law degree. He never went to library school. And he'd been, at that time, a law librarian for well over 10 years. By the time I left, 15 years. Every now and then, some little question would come up. The rest of us who had a library degree knew the best answer for that, and he'd kind of go, huh, what's this about? What are you people?
Well, there are
he didn't know the vocabulary.
things we do learn in the library degree programs that are needed from time to time.
But it was, as probably most, new librarians learn, I learned from the paraprofessionals. I had
Smart man.
I had two who worked for me, Jim Gage and Sharon Wade. And they ended up teaching me all I needed to know to work the Triple I's in a pack to do the collection management that may be done there. Back, like I say, when I was a student there's Mary Jane Caboyce, who was the periodical specialist. And it taught me all that I needed to know and kept teaching me that on that side. And they were very good about sharing. They also appreciated that I wasn't so locked in. My predecessor, I think, had been there for 8 years. And there's a lot of things that we ended up streamlining. Simple little things. Like there used to be, you had to have that little piece of paper that was part of a purchase order that would go with a book all the way through the system. and we cut that out. So you had to buy that expensive paper that came in with a dot matrix printer and
Oh, yeah.
keep track of the paper. The
So
cataloger
nothing
said
to
she never
putting up with,
actually ever used it because
Yeah.
she'd always double check. That was her way of double checking the
Especially
ISBN
having
number.
to put up with the noise and racket of the printer
Yeah.
too.
But I think you'd asked me earlier, some accomplishments in each of the jobs. Probably, I would say, and the people there might differ with me, but I would say probably I was the one who put the foot in the door about making the change that we've all had to do in the last 10, 15 years, the collection development, to stop the print, to depend upon the electronic. The one thing we did there while I was there is the state shepherds. I was able to go to AALL and a ALSIS collection development roundtable. I was able to hear that Georgetown had dropped theirs, that Northeastern had dropped theirs. And so I was able to come out to Frank Bay and say, hey, these things are costing us $32,000.
Oh, yeah, they were pricey.
And while we might need to keep Massachusetts, the other 49 states,
Well, you had online access.
we had Shepherds
Yeah.
and Alexis. And of course, not quite at that point, but real quick after that is when Keysight started to come out
Okay.
on West. So
So
you had
the
two competing
other
platforms.
system competing with it, the West version.
And like I said, $32,000 for those 49 sets. So, and I guess to say, it was probably from that was probably my third year there. So my last couple of years there, it was nice. I think I had earned a certain amount of respect from Frank Bay, and that I was able to make some suggestions and about the collection development policies and the spending that my predecessor never had to do. And it was questioning the duplication, questioning some of the things that we knew weren't part of our academic interests at the school, or the faculty or the classes, that they would start that trend towards trimming.
Yeah.
Had hoped, to be part of a renovation project. The school had bought the building behind the school. And New England, with 900 students, was always cramped for space, both for the collection and, more importantly, for the students. That was a very fun exercise, and it turns out it laid some great groundwork for when I moved on to the University of Florida, and especially when I came here. Ended up leaving New England, more for personal reasons.
Yeah, I was surprised. You were telling me earlier that Florida and that part of the South wasn't perhaps the place that was the best for you, and now suddenly you're back there.
Yeah, we went back there. It's when you have a kid, and you go around and look at the preschools in Boston, and the most affordable one we found was $1,500.
Oh.
The one that we
Did
really
they have
liked.
a wait list too? Some of them.
No,
had
that was not a wait list. The one that we really liked was about $2,100. No meals included.
Oh.
At that time, University of Florida was advertising, and they are the second closest law school to my hometown in Valdosta, Georgia.
Okay.
So went down there and interviewed with Kathy Price and Rick Donnelly, the associate director. Of course, they had just ending up finishing a remodeling project. So they were actually in a Publix grocery store with most of the collection boxed up, just the Florida collection on the shelves. They had created offices out of microfilm cabinets, and Kathy Price was down in one corner. And so I was having my interview with her out in the open.
I don't recall
all the other librarians
hearing about this phase of her work when she was doing one of these conversations.
The librarians, in the next few cubicles have been created, these microfilm cabinets. But no, she really appealed to her to have a dual degree librarian on the backside of the library. somebody who had a keen interest in collection development and was prepared to question the need for all this print with the move towards electronics.
Yeah.
Of course, they're going very different missions. While Frank Bay was proud of that, he thought and admired for what a great collection he had in New England, it was still more of a practitioner's collection.
Yeah.
Particularly like how we said, all the MCLE materials. Coming to the University of Florida was a research collection, which did have a change of mentalities that took a while to adjust. But even then, there's always room to be careful with your money, how you spend it.
I think that is the name of the game always for everybody, to some extent or another.
Yeah. So it was fun to show up. I started work there in July 2005. We moved there with my, at that point, 3-month-old son. Was able to, in a place like Gainesville, Florida, was able to afford to work on have one salary, so my wife was able to take the time off to be with our son that first year. Got there. It turns out to be a great time at University of Florida. There was a generational change. Mrs. Taylor, who was still coming in.
Yeah, Betty Taylor.
Betty Taylor. Who had been on the state payroll for 60 years, from being a typist in high school to her long career at UF. But I don't think Kathy ever saw herself as being a long term. She was kind of a 5 or so years as an in between. All the Rick Donnelly, Christopher, Pam, Bob, Susie, the 5 of the librarians had all been there for 20 plus years. They had hired one new UF grad, so he had been there for about 8 years. When they hired me, they hired one other UF grad who just graduated. So the funny thing was, Kathy and I were the only 2 working in that law library who had ever worked anywhere else. So it was interesting to bring some outside perspective and ask why things were the way they were.
I imagine, too, with such a long-term director tenure that Betty had, I mean, you weren't really right up against that, but she had been there for a very long time.
Yeah.
Had been the acting dean of the law school for a while. I mean, she was probably it in that school for a very long time.
Yeah.
And it was probably time for some new thinking on some of that stuff.
I mean, and she did leave some amazing legacies. It was always cracked me up. We had a very fine Latin American collection. Unfortunately, it had not been updated. So it was kind of at a standstill where it was held, but it's still, we were constantly getting visitors for that. So Betty Taylor's legacy still continues there. But it was a fun, adventurous time. The new facility, the Associate Director of Public Services, Pam Williams, was phasing towards her retirement. And that happened about the second year I was there. And so at which point they were able to move me up to head Public Services. They ended up hiring the other new person who had just graduated from the law school and was getting her library degree online to be the head of Public Services, and that was Elizabeth Oliver. And that was a real generational change. Here's 2 people, shall we say, in their mid-30s or so, really running the place. Because Kathy Price, was very good at delegating. She'd give you here's the goal, here's the big idea, run with it. So Elizabeth and I, working together, for a little over 2 years, was able to really shake up the place to get much better about responding to the faculty needs, adjusting the collection development to meet the gaps, because the main library, unfortunately, didn't have the resource to do all the non-law stuff. It was starting to scare me, the fact that they had pretty much dropped their approval plan. And so they weren't even getting University Press books from Oxford, Cambridge, well-respected authors and all that outside of law. So I was having to buy them for our faculty. um, being responsive to their needs very quickly. Realizing that the collection, so here's, you asked that same question about, achievements, accomplishments there. I went to Kathy Price at the opportunity when one of my staff members left and was able to say, I don't need to replace that person. Y'all need that person out of circulation, because at that time they just had one paraprofessional running it. And she couldn't be there from open to close 7 days a week. She needed help.
Yeah.
And Rick Donnelly, the station director there, that blew his mind that somebody actually was volunteering to give up a
You
position.
don't see that very often, I'm sure.
Well, at New England, we had 3 paraprofessionals and 3 librarians. When I got to UF, there was 2 librarians, 2 and a bit librarians, and because there was a part-time person there, and there was 8 paraprofessionals. And by that time, the volume of print materials coming through was about the same as what we had at New England. They had more money because they're spending more money on electronic materials than we were. And I could see the declining level because the budgets were staying fairly flat, so you're having to buy less materials coming in, shifting more to electronics anyway. So we couldn't justify having that many paraprofessionals. Ended up giving up another position down the road, whose salary was able to be redistributed to promote some other people. And getting that change and getting the buy-in from the paraprofessionals who stayed there and realizing that they need to up their game, that they're going to have to be cross-trained and multitask. It was great. I miss those people.
You hear so much of that in libraries, or at least I do, going around and talking to people about how that's become much more the norm. Everybody sort of does a little of everything when needed. And certainly more and more of the librarians and some of the higher level, with the right, have learned enough. Non-librarians end up in public services at least for a few hours every week. Not as departmentalized as it perhaps once was.
Yeah. It was also kind of fun. We started changing our hiring habits, and I ended up having the last 3 paraprofessionals I hired there were all people working on the library degrees. 2 of whom were law school graduates, and so it was kind of nice to be there as give them a step up in their careers. And
Sure.
Never had that opportunity at New England. That was really fun to be with those. And it's one of them is Avery Lee, who's making quite a name for herself with her Ignite programs. She has a big following amongst the SEAL people when at SEAL conferences.
Yeah. That's interesting.
It's good to see.
Well, so you were in Florida for a while.
Yep,
and then,
for 8 years.
And then you came directly here, or
Yep.
something in between I don't have on my list?
No, there's nothing in between.
Not good. My list is complete.
I got to admit, there was some. They had changes at UF because Kathy Price retired.
Yeah.
Her associate director had always said he's retiring when he turned 62. Elizabeth Otler, who was the head of the public services, got to be the interim director. Because like I said, she's one of the smartest librarians I've ever worked with, so it was good for them to do that for her. And we ended up hiring Claire Germain. Claire had her own vision and what she wanted the arrangements to be, and I could see why she would not do me any wrong. I didn't see a long-term future there, so it was time to move on.
Yeah.
Been there for 8 years.
So you had a good run.
Yeah, it was a good run. The opening came up here, advertising, so I applied. Thankfully, I had a nice trio of people who were able to give me advice about these kind of things. I had, of course, Kathy Price, me and my former boss and everything. But I also had Faye Jones at FSU, at Florida State University, and Nikki Singleton over at Florida Coastal.
Yeah, good people, and not that far away.
No, and was starting to be able to. I was somewhat flabbergasted. Was able to crack into and was getting invited to do interviews for director positions. I mean, I was looking for parallel moves, maybe associate director positions.
Well, there's off and on always been a bit of a shortage of people in directorships and a lot of openings. And
so
I've seen quite a change since I retired. And an awful lot of my friends who were fellow directors have since retired as well. And that's opened up a lot of places. And, the new group is sort of perked up from below, and they're now in there. You're one of them.
So yes, I got tapped here. I came to meet, because at that time there's actually only 2 employees, Associate Dean for Academic Affairs, Ellen Pryor, and a coordinator who was working for her. Our Dean, Royal Ferguson, was still sitting as a senior federal district court judge. But he was going to retire at the end of May and sit down finally to come start working for the law school. I mean, Dean Ferguson is the reason I'm here. The man is amazing, and he has a career, 25 years of practice in El Paso, nearly 20 years on the federal bench, first in San Antonio, then here in Dallas. He's a Texas Tech undergrad, a UT grad, and he knows the state, and the people know him, and he has this undying loyalty of a lot of them. And I'm probably going to count myself as one of those here, because he is an amazing man. So just that one man sealed me on the deal.
So he's sort of the attraction at this point for you.
I mean, getting him as our founding dean was probably the best thing ever. I mean,
sounds like
we got the money from the state.
Contacts are extremely handy.
I mean, we know we've got a decent state budget, and we have our tuition dollars to help us keep. I mean, with a good state budget, it keeps our tuition dollars down, so we have a good business plan and everything. But to get the acceptance of the community, I mean, he's the one that sold us. I guess the practical reasons why I got the job is I did have a vision for a new collection. I don't think I've gone extreme as like what Russell Gordon has been promoting and arguing for and has tried to implement at his schools that he started up. But thankfully, there's a bit of a balance, like what Michael Whiteman has written about in his book, or his article, Book Learning in the 21st Century, when the ABA was finally getting around to updating its credentials. It always kind of bothered me a little bit at the University of Florida. I mean, it's a research school. I understand that.
Yeah.
But their tuition while I was there went from less than $12,000 to well over $22,000. And I was spending in the library a good $200,000 or $300,000 a year on materials that nobody ever touched, just in case.
Just to have them and keep the collection at the caliber they had originally thought they should have.
I mean, if we had state funding, like I think the University of Iowa enjoys to a certain extent for their collection, that is a mission. That's a good mission to have. But if it's coming off the students' tuition dollars, that's a little nervous about. That's a little bothersome. Also, thankful to Elizabeth Oliver and the mission that she's been leading at UF about getting the librarians involved in teaching research in the first year program. Had a really good idea of how we could work here with our goal here to have practitioner-ready graduates. We are teaching the research, the librarians are teaching the research in the first year program.
Mm-hmm.
We also have enough support that we can offer enough seats to all the students to take advanced legal research as upperclassmen. But we also have here something called segments. I had called them labs, but we ended up figuring out segments, in which pretty much all the upper division classes, we will have an opportunity for the librarians to go in there and introduce the students to the particular resources for that class. So for admin law, for example, you can go in there and give them a little more in-depth than they get, a lot more in-depth than they get from the first year class, a little bit more than they might have gotten if they're taking the ALR class, how to use the resources. But we also get to set them an exercise for which they do a written product that the professor gets to grade. But we also get to grade, and they turn into us a research history, a research bibliography, and a research trail, so that we can make sure that they have kind of gone through the right process, hit the right targets, in that focused area. And that's something I know librarians at UF and at other schools that has been dreaming of, and appreciate that opportunities when the professors let them come in.
Yeah.
Whereas here it's kind of required.
Well, certainly the practicing bar has been telling the academic bar for years, we have to have a little more practicum in your curriculums, because we don't want to, in this day and age, have to mentor these people as extensively as it may have been the case before.
And we do have we have actually three sets of segments. We have the research segment, the writing segment, which I kind of touched on because they do the written product with the professor, but we also did a skills segment that incorporated on the substantive classes. We just have that fascinating opportunity. It's great. But it's also been fun, going back to the collection, is that, yes, I am, and Michael Whiteman hit us really great in his article, so it made me realize that I was not going too far out on a limb by myself. That, yes, I have here is anything and anything I can for Texas. And the really great reason for that is for most of our students, they would not be going into large firms. They would be solo practitioners, small businesses. Texas Bar, just like most other bars in this country, has one of those services, Casemaker Fast Case. In fact, Texas is actually great. If you're a solo practitioner, in the Texas Bar, you have both Casemaker and Fast Case. So I've seen a great working model, and I've seen it back in Florida, and then I've seen it here in Texas, where the small solo practitioner might just buy those one or two books, attend those specialty CLEs, and that's his research budget. Because he has Fast Case or Casemaker. They look for the statutes and cases on point. I met a gentleman down in Granbury, Texas, who has a small family law practice, and basically that's all he buys the few Texas family law manuals that come out, and with his access to the CLE collections, he uses Fast Case, and he has a very successful practice down there. And so I think his spending outside, he has to do CLE no matter what. So I think he said he spends on average of $300 a year on books.
Well, I would imagine quite a few lawyers basically operate much the same way. I mean, even in the old days, firms may have extensive libraries, but solo practitioners were sort of our bread and butter. Come in, or the county library, or wherever they would go, the county library.
But I think it's eaten into the market. I mean, I've seen and heard Lexus once in a while make their pitches for their state collections. But they're still $100, $200 a month. And if your clientele don't necessarily support that, Fast Case, Casemaker is support for.
Well, it's competitive. I mean, in the old days, you had sort of single sources of stuff, and you needed to get some of it. But now there's alternatives. There's competition in law book, or I should say legal information sources.
But probably the And also have, the basic federal materials, the U.S. Code Annotated, U.S. Code CFR. The only cases I have is the Texas cases and the U.S. Cases. And, well, actually I have to add the U.S. cases because they were donated to us. Now the Supreme Court Reporter is the only active subscription I have. My one small weakness, and I blame Kathy Price for this, is I still do have a small approval plan for University Press books that are KF and the KFT range for Texas. It's maybe ends up costing me $2,000 to $3,000 a year.
I imagine those are not too likely to show up online at some point.
No, and like I said, it's only $2,000 or $3,000 a year. I don't blame Kathy because that was the University Press books at UF focused on those. But as Michael Whiteman talks about in his article, and it's the belief I think I have, and it was the belief I had at UF because, well, like I said, I saw there was that need for the non-law stuff, is that you got to have the procedure set up, the business mentality to respond to just in time. And here we can do that for law materials. I would be happy to buy a set of Matthew Bender's Environmental Law, the big 20-volume set that's $2,000 to $3,000 a year to maintain, if the people are using it. Like back at UF, there's all these huge sets there that nobody ever touched. But there was like one professor who had 2 sets in her office, and she is prolific. She was printing out at least 2 articles a year. That's where the money should be going. Support that. Somebody's being productive using materials. For the occasional reference question, to something we have access to on Westlaw Lexis, let's just go to Westlaw Lexis.
So in terms of, you intrigued me, Ed, because you've got a startup law school. There have been in the past, but in other eras, how you built libraries, and it sounds like you're focusing a lot of the acquisitions very carefully. You've got the basic stuff, Texas, somewhat in print, like some of the Texas cases, and but a lot of it you're sort of targeting what is really being used. Is that a correct statement on my part?
That's it. It's an active involvement, working with the faculty, of course, responding to their requests, and getting to know the faculty to make suggestions to them.
Yes.
Now, like you said, we're still a startup. So a lot of it at the moment is still based on instructional need, curriculum development. Which is actually most of our mission here. We are not planning to be a research school. We are a teaching school.
Well, you have a bit of a research library just right across town at SMU, and State Texas also, through Texas A&M is possibly going to build one over in Fort Worth.
And I would probably go with a few other directors who I've heard suggest this, is rather than us spending the money, rather even if you have to take a bit of it out of the library budget, be prepared to pay for the professors to go to the collection instead of building the collection for the librarians. And like I said, that's most of my professors are looking at for what little research and writing they're doing is Texas materials. Deal with practice, the practice that they're doing currently, and what they're working with the students on. And so that's
from what you described,
much smaller market than
that's your niche here in the law school market, is to prepare local lawyers who will be in small solo or very small practices in terms of other lawyers. Most
of our students, the majority of our students, are coming from the DFW, the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex area. We only have 2 out-of-state students. And we have a larger handful from elsewhere in Texas. So, that is our goal, is here in the DFW area. My colleagues on the other side, they were at DFW. We did hold our breath when Texas A&M bought them. Because part of our argument for being here was there was no state law school in the Metroplex. They have decided that part of their mission is being part of the fine institution that Texas A&M is,
Yeah.
to be a national school with a national collection, with national faculty.
Yeah, it's a very different model.
And a very different model. I
here.
mean, we were all kind of scared here, wondering were they going to come in and try to be a more affordable state law school like Texas Tech or Texas Southern. But they've not. They're. I guess they're trying. Well, whether they admit this or not, they're chasing UT.
Oh, I'm
University
not
of Texas.
surprised. I remember even years ago the rivalries between the institutions, and it
Yeah.
doesn't surprise me that
It's,
now that A&M is big time into
they're-
law,
they're
that
gonna probably
law
try to
schools, they're
capture
going
it.
to try and follow the UT model.
Yeah.
And, you know, healthy competition is probably good for both of them.
Yeah. But like I said, amongst the law librarians, it is great. I mean, like this third week I was here, I had called and said hello to Gail Daly because she was still there at SMU, and she invited me over for lunch.
Yeah.
And of course, it shows you how small the world is. She had also worked for Kathy Price, and so we're both fans of her and her leadership style.
Yeah.
And
Well, that sort of hands off, let you do a lot of your own thing. It's,
yeah,
it's
just
nice.
provides the big idea,
Yeah.
the vision that they move forward on.
Good. Well, Ed, we're I'm looking over. We haven't really talked about some of your own writing. I know you've at least done some. You wrote a chapter for law libraries in the digital age. And
Yeah. Had to do a little because that was part of the model UF to get promotion.
Yeah.
Because there was an assistant university librarian as an academic rank. You're trying to go for associate university librarian. Yeah, that was did get the law libraries in the digital age. Wrote the technical services librarian chapter on that, and that was probably the big part of that was the adoption and better use of all the technical tools we have for access services and for managing the inventory control, the discovery platforms. Most of the other things I wrote, my other attempt at being serious was about the lack of indexing of open access journals. We keep hearing, particularly as far as the Durham statement that should be our model is open access. And yes, bless Google and Google Scholar, we have a fair amount of access. But at the same time, not having proper indexing, you'll lose some of the control. And unfortunately, it's going to probably continue that way, us losing control. Because I can't see Legal Track and Index Legal Periodicals. I want to see these seem like they're dumbing down because they can't. But that's probably because they can't keep up with the volume of content.
Keep the costs down and so many more journals coming along. And, yeah.
Of course, I did have my fun piece was I can't remember my exact, I don't know, but it was basically what did the federal legislation do to tick off Canada? And it was the ignorance of the law is no excuse. The state legislation said they were going to impose the need to have the international driver's license, that they would not recognize a foreign driver's license. Well, there's international law that says as long as it's got the picture of the person and their names in romantic letters so that you can read it and are English reading people, you had to accept it for the 90 days of a tourist.
Yeah. I mean, I go up into Canada, and I always use my own driver's license there. Seems to work. In fact, I have one you can even go back and forth across that border with, because it's
and that was also
a citizenship proof built into it.
Yeah, and that was also a fun thing to do with. We had the new librarian there, Lauren Turner, who has a keen interest in international law. So she was able to do the international law area, and my colleague Patty Morgan, Patricia Morgan, was our Florida native. So she was able to go back and look at the legislative history, because that's part of what we did was look at legislative history for the changing standards for driver's license over time. So it was a good collaborative, fun project.
Well, shifting focus one more time, you've been active professionally. You've served as president of the Southeastern chapter of AELL. You've been chair of the Government Documents Special Interest section of the association, and chair of the Indexing of Periodical Literature Committee. Obviously, your interest, you just explained, is probably part of that too. You want to talk about that aspect of your work?
Of course, that was one of the things about Kathy Price. She pushed you out,
Mm-hmm.
wanted you to get involved, and I had just started doing that at New England when I left there, because I was a committee chair for the Law Librarians in New England. Had helped plan one of their, they have the 2 meetings a year.
No, I
We had
remember
hosted
that
one
when I
in New
was
England,
there.
planning that, so to get in that. Came to Florida, and I was really lucky. Pam Williams, who's been the associate director there, had a lengthy career in SEAL, so she was able to make introductions and get me involved there. And it was fun being on the membership committee there for quite a few years to get to meet the new people. Ended up being the SEAL president, and sandwiched in between 2 great people, Carol Watson, the director at the University of Georgia, and then Pamela Melton, the associate director at South Carolina. Of course, come here, in my second year here, they drafted me, because I'm currently the vice president of the Dallas Association of Law Librarians.
Yeah. Well, they're always probably
Which
looking
is-
for a good person who's willing to say yes.
And are not run fast enough.
Yeah, or maybe.
Of course, I mean, Dahl is a very different animal, and it's kind of interesting.
You must be
to be
part
there.
of the Southwestern chapter too.
Well, part of Southwestern.
Yeah.
But Dahl was interesting because it's mostly law firms.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's often true of the city chapter.
the city chapters.
Yeah.
There's, other than maybe the annual institute, little involvement from SMU. But since we're here downtown, and these people are quite literally our neighbors. There's 3 firms next building over that have law librarians. And but that's been very good.
Well, I saw the same thing last week when I was down doing conversations with colleagues in Houston, the Hall, Houston area law library, law librarians. Is very active. In fact, they had a meeting while I was there, and I got to go and get a free lunch. I can't complain about that, and tell them all over about the oral history project. I noticed in the room, the academics, firm, corporate, county, it was really a composite of the whole group of law librarians in the city.
Yeah. But I guess I'm having a campaign here, because like I said, I didn't want to quite let go of SEAL. So while I was still the past president there, I went ahead and proposed, y'all to come to Dallas. It's a nice place.
Mm-hmm.
And to introduce myself to SWAL, I said, hey, y'all to come to Dallas. So I ended up coming to host for
a few people coming, huh?
We have a joint meeting here in April 2016 of SWAL and SEAL. And because of the SEAL model having the pre-conference institute, I'm going to get Dahl involved. So we got to have 3 chapters here. So
well, it sounds like there could be some interesting things happening, not just here at the university, but also in the broader professional community locally. And you're going to be part of those. That's wonderful.
It's very fun.
Yeah.
But I know sometimes I look at it and it's kind of sad and funny at the same time. Looking at Facebook, is my 2 biggest chunks of friends are still the people from my childhood, from my hometown, and then it's the law librarians.
Well, I don't do Facebook myself. My 2 kids do, but and they keep me sort of posted on what they see from time to time. But that doesn't surprise me. That would be 2 likely sources of friends for Facebook.
What's going on?
Yeah. Well, Ed, we're sort of nearing the end of today's conversation, which has been interesting and fascinating, and I'm always intrigued by anybody who in this day and age is putting together a whole new place from scratch, as you are. But is there anything we've not talked about that you would like to mention?
I guess my chance to just go on the record for some reason. Because one time you asked about the mentors, and I got to say, I don't think I ever.
Yeah, you mentioned some people, but
I've never had. I don't think.
Asked.
I don't think I ever had a really in-depth mentor, but I've had a lot of people who've had an impact on my career, who've been an example of how to run a library, how to serve our patrons.
Yeah.
And from Ann Acton, who is the associate director of New England, a certain amount of patience. Of course, Kathy Price.
I would think Kathy, when you described her, it sounded very mentor-like to me.
A big idea, and I guess it is, because I got to admit, she was, as you said, I was saying earlier, she'd push you out there, and she's, for me, at least one other colleague at University of Florida, she was really pushing. Sometimes she pushed a little too hard, but it's so there. But it was a great example there is that sometimes you need to pair people to temper them. Where her associate director Rick Donnelly, who had been at University of Florida for nearly 30 years, who knew the people there, was able to balance her with his consistency and methodical approach to apply things. I had mentioned Nikki Singleton and Faye Jones for the career advice and moving to making that jump to directorship. Within the association, because it takes a lot of practice and patience, a bit of art, to be a good leader within your association. And a person who set an example for me, and that was Beth Edelman, because I was the secretary treasurer of ALSIS when I started off when she was the chair, and the diligence that it requires to run, and ALSIS being one of the biggest SISs, with I think at that time nearly 1,800 members. I mean, it took some effort, coordination. She had an example there. That's surprising for me, actually, is that you can have a peer mentor. And like I was telling earlier, Elizabeth Oliver is one of the smartest law librarians I ever worked with. Actually, another one in that same camp for me was Kristen McCarthy at New England. That where you can learn from a peer, particularly when you've been in a tech services area and you're trying to learn and want to know more about public services and the mission about legal research. So there's been quite a few people.
Sounds like you've had a pretty good run up until now, and I would imagine you have a good future ahead. Certainly, it looks like it to me. You've got some interesting things you're going to be doing here.
Yeah. We just got to get through our accreditation.
Yeah, well, that's...
And I think
that's one of the realities of starting up a new law school, or even maintaining one. I mean, if things slip too much, the ABA comes to threatening.
But it's been very good with the like I say, we have the state support. We're a state school. We're part of we're not directly part of UNT, the University of North Texas. We're within the same system with them, and the libraries form a good network there. And
and you're right in the middle of town here, in the middle of downtown Dallas, in a nice facility. You gave me the Cook's tour a little bit before we started today's chat, and I'm favorably very much impressed. I'm sort of envious looking at all the space you still have, but that'll fill up with students and books and whatever else comes along.
It does. It's a fun adventure, and it's. I don't want to say it's a constant reinvention, but it's got to be proactive, keep moving forward.
Well, Ed Hart, it's certainly been a pleasure chatting with you this afternoon, actually, here in Dallas, and hearing a lot about what you are doing, not only here at the University of North Texas, or North Texas University, I guess, correctly, but what you've done in other places, and it sounds like this makes a nice contribution to our overall oral history. And I want to thank you not just on my own behalf, but on behalf of Michelle Wu, Frank Kodak, and Dick Spinelli, our colleagues with whom I have the pleasure and honor of being able to go around and talk with people like yourself on camera for the Oral History of Law Librarianship section of the High and Online database.
Well, thank you very much, and it's been an excellent opportunity to kind of maybe pause here in what I hope probably is the middle of my career,
Yeah.
to see where I've come from and see where I've got to go.
Okay. Well, you're headed in what appears to be a good direction.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.